The vastness of space had always been full of mysteries, but some things were considered universal truths, unchanging facts that no one dared to question. One such truth was that the Vraxis Dominion were the only true Deathworlders in the known galaxy. They had survived on a world so hostile, so merciless, that no other species had ever come close to enduring such brutality. Their biology was engineered by nature itself to withstand extremes, their instincts sharpened by generations of struggle. To the rest of the galaxy, they were monsters, unrelenting, unbeatable, and feared by all. So when the Dominion scouts intercepted reports of another Deathworld species, they laughed. It had to be a mistake. The message came from an outer rim trade hub, a place where rumors and half-truths spread like wildfire. A low-ranking intelligence officer had flagged it. A new species had recently made contact with the Galactic community. They called themselves humans, and according to the reports, they came from a world classified as a high-threat environment. Vraxis Command dismissed it. No world could rival their own. No species could endure what they had. But the reports didn't stop. More and more accounts surfaced, tales of humans surviving impossible conditions, adapting to worlds where even Vraxis warriors wouldn't tread. There were stories of human explorers who had braved the crushing depths of gas giants, of soldiers who had fought in planetary wars that should have killed them 100 times over. Some claimed the humans had even conquered their own planet, reshaping it to their will rather than being shaped by it. It was impossible. Yet, the whispers continued. High Commander Karthoks, a battle-scarred veteran of the Dominion, was the first to take the reports seriously. He had seen too much, fought too many wars to ignore the possibility. If this new species was truly what they claimed to be, then it meant only one thing. A challenge. And the Vraxis did not back down from a challenge. A diplomatic envoy was arranged, but Karthoks had no intention of mere diplomacy. If these humans were truly Deathworlders, they would have to prove it, not with words, but with action. The Dominion's reputation as the galaxy's most feared warriors was at stake. They would test these humans in the only way they knew how. And so, a Vraxis warship was sent to the human homeworld. The moment they entered Earth's orbit, something felt wrong. The blue-green planet below didn't look like a Deathworld. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. It lacked the hellish storms of Vraxis Prime, the burning wastelands, the acid rains that stripped metal in minutes. It looked peaceful. Deceptively so. This is their world? One of Karthoks's officers sneered, glancing at the lush forests and sprawling oceans. A Deathworld? This is a joke. But Karthoks did not laugh. Because as their sensors scanned the surface, the readings sent shivers down his spine. This planet was alive in ways Vraxis Prime never had been. The gravity, the climate shifts, the sheer number of predatory species, it was chaotic, unpredictable. Even the weather patterns seemed to move with a kind of vicious intent. Earth was not a single Deathworld. It was many, a planet that had forged its people through endless trials, through war, through hardship. And then, the humans answered their hail. A single voice came through the transmission. Calm. Confident. Unshaken. This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You've entered restricted airspace. State your purpose. Karthoks smiled, baring his razor-sharp teeth. Finally, a worthy opponent. But what neither he nor his crew knew was that they were about to face something far more terrifying than they had imagined. Because the Vraxis had spent centuries believing they were the only true survivors of the galaxy. They were wrong. And they were about to find out why. The transmission cut out, leaving only the steady hum of the Vraxis warship's command deck. Silence stretched as Karthoks leaned forward, his claws tapping against the armrest of his chair. The human's voice had been controlled, steady. No fear. No hesitation. He had expected arrogance, maybe even desperation, a species trying too hard to prove itself. But Captain Elias Carter had spoken with the calm certainty of someone who was not only in control but accustomed to dealing with threats. Run a full planetary scan, Karthoks ordered. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. His crew moved quickly, activating long-range sensors. The data poured in: vast oceans, sprawling cities, continents brimming with life. But there was something else, something that made even the battle-hardened officers of the Dominion shift uneasily. This world had seen war. Countless wars. The scars were everywhere: remnants of old battlefields, craters left behind by devastating weapons, ruins buried beneath the surface. Yet, despite all of that destruction, the humans had thrived. They hadn't just survived a hostile world. They had tamed it, rebuilt it, and reshaped it to their will over and over again. One of the officers muttered in disbelief: their own world fought against them, and they still conquered it. Before Karthoks could respond, the ship's comm system crackled back to life. "Vraxis vessel," Captain Carter's voice returned, sharper this time. "You have 10 seconds to identify your intent. If you are here for peaceful relations, we will escort you to a secure location. If you are here for any other reason," he paused, "we will respond accordingly." There it was again. That unwavering certainty. Karthoks had encountered many species in his lifetime. Most cowered before the Dominion. Some tried to posture, to act stronger than they were. But this was different. The humans weren't afraid, yet they also weren't reckless. They were assessing the situation, just as he was. Interesting. He activated the communicator. "This is High Commander Karthoks of the Vraxis Dominion," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "We have come to see for ourselves if the rumors are true." A brief silence. Then Carter replied, "And what rumors would those be?" "That your kind are Deathworlders." Another pause. Then, to Karthoks' surprise, Carter laughed. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't nervous. It was the kind of laugh that came from someone who had heard something amusingly obvious. "Oh," Carter said, "you'll find out soon enough." Karthoks' eyes narrowed. The transmission ended again, but this time, their sensors picked up something new: movement. Multiple vessels were launching from the planet's surface. Not a full fleet, not a show of overwhelming force, but enough to make it clear that the humans were not taking this lightly. Their ships were smaller than the Vraxis warship, sleek and fast, built for maneuverability rather than brute force. And yet, Karthoks felt no relief. "Commander," one of his officers called out. "They are locking onto us." "They won't fire," Karthoks said. "Not yet." But he could feel it: this was not a species that bluffed. If pushed, they would retaliate. Not out of fear, but because it was simply what they did. He had no intention of making the first move. The Dominion did not deal in reckless skirmishes. They chose their battles carefully. So he did something no one expected. He ordered the warship to stand down. A moment later, a message came through: coordinates for a landing zone. The humans were calling his bluff, daring him to meet them on their own soil. Karthoks grinned. "Prepare a landing party," he ordered. Minutes later, the Dominion shuttle sliced through Earth's atmosphere. The landing was smooth, but the moment the ramp lowered, Karthoks and his warriors were greeted by a sight they had never expected. Humans stood in formation, waiting. But they weren't dressed in elaborate ceremonial uniforms, nor did they bear the rigid postures of species desperate to impress. These were soldiers. Not just any soldiers. Veterans. Karthoks could see it in their stance, in their eyes, calculating, unwavering, as if they had already prepared for any possible outcome. They had seen war. Lived through it. Survived. Captain Carter stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was neutral, but his presence radiated authority. Karthoks stepped forward. He was taller, bulkier, and by all physical measures, the more imposing of the two. And yet, when Carter met his gaze, there was no intimidation. No sign that he saw Karthoks as something to be feared. The human extended a hand. Karthoks hesitated for only a second before clasping it. The grip was firm. Solid. A warrior's grip. "Welcome to Earth," Carter said. Karthoks glanced around. The air was thick with tension, But beneath it, something else lingered. Something he hadn't expected. Respect. Not submission. Not arrogance. Mutual respect. For the first time, he wondered if the Dominion had made a mistake in underestimating these beings. Because if the humans truly were Deathworlders, then perhaps the Vraxis weren't the apex predators they had always believed themselves to be. And if that was the case, then the galaxy was about to change forever. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and distant rain as Karthoks stepped onto human soil. The gravity was slightly lighter than Vraxis Prime, but the air was thicker, richer, filled with an oxygen balance that felt almost intoxicating. His muscles tensed instinctively, his body adjusting to this new environment, but his mind remained sharp, focused. The humans stood unmoving, disciplined, their weapons holstered but present. A silent message: we do not seek a fight, but we are prepared for one. Captain Carter motioned for Karthoks to follow, leading him and his warriors through a towering steel structure built with an efficiency the Vraxis couldn't ignore. There was no unnecessary ornamentation, no attempt to impress with grandeur. It was functional, precise, designed for survival, not vanity. Karthoks had studied many species, but nothing about the humans aligned with the patterns he expected. Most intelligent civilizations that endured harsh conditions evolved toward caution, their survival instincts favoring avoidance over confrontation. Even the Vraxis, as fearsome as they were, relied on intimidation to minimize unnecessary conflict. But humans? They did not simply endure threats. They embraced them. Carter led them into a large room lined with reinforced walls, maps flickering across digital displays. The insignia of Earth's United Defense Fleet was etched into the metal, a stark reminder that this was a species accustomed to warfare. A woman stood waiting. She was older, her face lined with the kind of exhaustion that only came from years of making impossible decisions. Her uniform bore the markings of high command, but it was her eyes that stood out to Karthoks, calculating, assessing, as if she were already 10 steps ahead of this conversation. "This is Admiral Harper," Carter introduced. "She oversees our planetary defense initiatives." Harper didn't offer a hand like Carter had. Instead, she simply studied Karthoks, then gestured toward the screen behind her. "You came here for answers," she said, her voice steady. "Let's start with the facts." The display shifted, showing a rotating model of Earth. Red markers blinked across the surface, data points layering over historical footage. Karthoks narrowed his eyes as he saw wars, conflicts, destruction on a scale even the Dominion rarely saw outside of planetary invasions. "We have been fighting each other for as long as we've existed," Harper continued. "Empires have risen and fallen. Entire civilizations wiped out. We don't fear war, Commander Karthoks. We are forged by it." She tapped the screen, and the footage changed again, this time to space battles. Humans engaging in skirmishes with hostile alien factions, defending colonies on distant moons, surviving against odds that should have overwhelmed them. "We don't look like Deathworlders to you," Carter said, "because our world doesn't look like a Deathworld at first glance. But it's not just the predators or the weather or the environment that made us what we are. It's us. We are our own greatest threat." Karthoks felt an uneasy realization settle in his chest. The Dominion had believed that the strength of a species came from the harshness of their world. That survival was dictated by nature, by how much suffering a planet could inflict on those who lived there. But humans had reshaped that rule. They had become their own crucible. They hadn't just survived their death world. They had mastered it. And then, when that wasn't enough, they had turned on each other, forging themselves into something stronger through endless conflict. His warriors shifted behind him, some exchanging wary glances. They understood it now. The reason why these beings didn't flinch, why they didn't feel the need to prove their worth with boasts or threats. Because they already knew. Karthoks exhaled slowly. "Impressive," he admitted. "But history is not the same as the present. We came here to determine whether your kind are truly our equals." Harper's gaze didn't waver. "You didn't come here to talk. You came here to test us." Carter smirked. So why don't we give you a demonstration? The tension in the room sharpened, but there was no hostility, just the unspoken agreement between warriors who understood each other. Agreed, Karthoks said. The humans didn't waste time. Within the hour, Karthoks and his warriors were escorted to a massive training facility, an open combat arena where human soldiers sparred with one another in drills that looked both practiced and brutal. The rules were simple: no weapons, no armor, just raw ability. Karthoks' second-in-command, a seasoned fighter named Reposts, stepped forward first. He was the Dominion's best close-combat warrior, towering over the humans with muscle packed from a lifetime of battle. He had crushed challengers from a dozen species. He was a predator. His opponent was a human named Sergeant Cole. Cole was smaller, leaner, and to the untrained eye, he looked like he had no chance. But Karthoks was no fool. He saw how the human moved, his stance balanced, his breathing controlled, his muscles coiled in readiness. The fight began. Reposts lunged, powerful and direct. His claws swiped toward the human's midsection, a strike that should have sent Cole flying. But the human wasn't there. Cole sidestepped, his body weaving just out of reach, his counterattack coming with surgical precision. His fists struck in rapid succession, one to the ribs, one to the throat, one to the side of the knee. Each hit calculated, placed with deadly intent. Reposts staggered, caught off guard by the speed. He roared, lashing out again. This time, Cole didn't evade. He redirected, using Reposts' own strength against him, twisting his momentum until the much larger warrior crashed to the ground. Silence. Reposts didn't get up. He wasn't unconscious, but he was done. Defeated. Overpowered not by brute strength, but by sheer skill. The Vraxis warriors stared in disbelief. Karthoks clenched his jaw. He had expected the humans to be strong, to be cunning, to be resilient. But this was something else. Cole extended a hand, pulling Reposts to his feet. There was no gloating, no arrogance, just an unspoken acknowledgement between warriors. That was the moment Karthoks truly understood. The Dominion had made a mistake. They had come here expecting to test the humans. To see if they were worthy. But the truth was far more unsettling. The humans were already prepared. And if the Dominion didn't adapt, they would be the ones left behind. The air in the training facility was thick with unspoken tension. Karthoks had always been a warrior first, a commander second. He knew what it meant to measure the strength of an enemy, to test their limits. But now, watching his best fighter struggle to his feet after being utterly dismantled by a species the Dominion had barely considered a threat, something unfamiliar settled in his gut. Not fear. Something worse. Doubt. Reposts, pride wounded but resolve unbroken, gritted his teeth and gave a sharp nod to the human before stepping back into line. He would not speak of what had just happened, not yet, but Karthoks saw the shift in his posture. The awareness that he had underestimated his opponent, and in doing so, had lost before the fight had even begun. Carter crossed his arms, studying Karthoks. The human captain didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The message was already clear. The Vraxis had walked onto this planet believing they were dominant. They were wrong. But that wasn't what unsettled Karthoks the most. It was the way the humans carried themselves. Even after proving their strength, they remained measured. Focused. They had nothing to prove, no need to demand submission. Because they already knew exactly what they were capable of. And yet, they were still holding back. The thought sent a slow chill through Karthoks' spine. He had spent decades waging war, breaking civilizations, crushing rebellions before they could rise. But these humans, they were warriors by nature, by choice, by the very fabric of their existence. And they weren't showing everything. Before Karthoks could speak, the lights overhead flickered. A warning siren blared across the facility, cutting through the tension like a blade. Human soldiers immediately sprang into action, moving with coordinated efficiency. This was no drill. Harper's voice cut through the comms. All units report. We have an unidentified object inbound, high-velocity approach from orbit. Karthoks' eyes narrowed. His warriors immediately reached for their weapons, instinct driving them to prepare for battle. But the humans, they didn't panic. Even in the face of an unknown threat, their movements were controlled, sharp, refined. Carter turned to him. "You expecting company?" Karthoks' jaw clenched. No. Whatever this was, it wasn't the Dominion. And that meant someone else had been watching. The displays lit up, showing a fast-moving object streaking toward Earth's atmosphere. It was big. Bigger than any standard warship, and moving too fast for something that size. Then, suddenly, it split apart. Dozens of smaller craft detached, breaking formation and scattering in different directions. Some headed for military installations. Others toward major cities. A coordinated strike. Karthoks' blood ran cold. He had seen this kind of tactic before. Not a show of power. A test. A probe. Someone was trying to measure Earth's defenses. Carter's expression hardened as Harper's voice crackled through the comms again. Multiple unknown vessels incoming, high-energy signatures detected. No known affiliation. Karthoks made a decision in that instant. He had not come here as an enemy. And he would not stand by while another force threatened a species that had just proven itself as something far more dangerous than he had ever expected. "This isn't just an attack," he muttered. "It's a calculation. They're testing your response time, your strategy." Carter nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure they regret it." The next few moments were a blur of controlled chaos. Human forces deployed in rapid succession, their tactical formations so precise that Karthoks had to remind himself that this wasn't routine for them. This was simply how they functioned. There was no hesitation. No wasted movement. And when the first enemy ships entered the lower atmosphere, the counterattack was immediate. Earth's defense grid lit up, launching interceptors, deploying automated drones, mobilizing ground units with a speed that even the Dominion rarely achieved. The sky erupted in fire and steel, and Karthoks watched, mesmerized, as the humans met the unknown head-on. The invaders weren't like anything he had seen before, strange, angular ships, their energy readings fluctuating unpredictably. But if they thought Earth was an easy target, they had miscalculated. A formation of human fighter jets wove between the enemy crafts, dodging plasma fire with impossible precision. The ground-based railguns locked onto targets faster than Karthoks' own ships could in live combat. And then there were the soldiers. He watched as entire squads of human troops engaged enemy forces that had managed to land. They didn't just fight, they adapted. Within minutes, they had studied the enemy's movements, adjusted their tactics, exploited weaknesses. Karthoks realized something in that moment. The Vraxis had always thought of themselves as the pinnacle of warfare. The ultimate survivors. They weren't. They were calculators, warriors who chose battles carefully, who avoided unnecessary risks. But humans? Humans thrived in battle. They didn't just endure conflict. They became sharper, more efficient, more dangerous with every passing second. Carter turned to him. "You wanted to know if we were Deathworlders?" He motioned to the battlefield. "There's your answer." And Karthoks knew, deep in his bones, that the Dominion would never see the galaxy the same way again. Because humans weren't just survivors. They were predators. The battlefield was chaos, but it was controlled chaos, the kind only a species born in conflict could manage. Explosions ripped through the sky as Earth's defense forces tore through the invading ships with terrifying precision. Humans fought like they had done this 1,000 times before, adapting in real time, countering every move with ruthless efficiency. Karthoks had always believed that war was about power, about who held the most strength. But this was something else. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were learning. Every failed attack, every mistake, within minutes, they adjusted, changed tactics, became more dangerous. And yet, even as the invaders fell, something gnawed at him. This wasn't a full-scale invasion. It was too calculated, too precise. The attackers weren't trying to conquer. They were testing. Then the sky ripped open. A massive rupture in space, a shimmering tear of energy that distorted everything around it, flashed above Earth's orbit. Korvax's blood ran cold as a colossal vessel emerged, dwarfing everything else in the battle. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't any known faction. And if the first wave had been a probe, this was the real threat. The comms crackled. Harper's voice was sharp, controlled, but with an edge of something Korvax hadn't heard before. Uncertainty. New contact. That ship is off the charts. Korvax's mind raced. This was a design unlike anything in the Dominion's archives. The sheer energy output was staggering. This was no ordinary warship. Then the scans came in. And Korvax felt a chill settle deep in his chest. The ship wasn't just powerful. It was alive. Organic energy signatures pulsed through its structure, shifting and adapting as if it were sensing the battle around it. This wasn't just a vessel. It was a weaponized intelligence. And it was watching. Then, without warning, it spoke. Not through comms, not through intercepted transmissions, directly into their minds. You are not ready. Korvax's vision blurred as something pressed against his consciousness, a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. Around him, his warriors staggered, gripping their heads as if fighting off an unseen weight. Even the humans faltered for a brief moment, but only a moment. Then Carter's voice cut through the comms, firm, steady. I don't know who you are, but if you think we're going to stand down, you don't know what kind of fight you just started. A low, almost amused hum resonated through Korvax's mind. The entity wasn't threatened. It wasn't afraid. It was curious. And that was far, far worse. Because Korvax had encountered conquerors before. He had fought enemies who wanted resources, power, dominion over weaker species. But this was something different. This thing didn't want to conquer. It wanted to see what humanity would do next. And then it acted. From the massive vessel, tendrils of energy shot out, latching onto the debris of fallen ships, both human and alien alike. The wreckage began to move, reshaping, reconfiguring, rebuilding. Harper's voice was clipped. It's harvesting the battlefield. Korvax's hands curled into fists. It wasn't just observing. It was learning. Replicating. Evolving. Then, the first new ships broke free from the massive vessel. The same twisted, organic metal hybrid design, but now with Earth's technology embedded within them. Carter's expression darkened. He didn't need to say it. They were now fighting against their own weapons. The battle wasn't just escalating. It had just begun. The battlefield had changed. What had started as an invasion had turned into something far worse, a battle of adaptation, of survival. The alien intelligence wasn't just attacking anymore. It was evolving. The newly formed enemy ships, built from the wreckage of human and Dominion technology, moved with unnatural fluidity. Their hulls pulsed with an eerie energy, shifting mid-flight as if they were alive. Every strike against them, every explosion that should have crippled them, only seemed to teach them how to resist the next one. Korvax had faced countless wars, but never an enemy like this. Carter stood at the center of the chaos, barking orders, eyes sharp, unwavering. He wasn't just fighting the battle, he was thinking ahead. Harper, adjust targeting parameters. Find out what part of those ships is still mechanical. If it can be programmed, we can disrupt it. Harper was already ahead of him. We're patching a cyber warfare payload through now. But they're adapting faster than we can counter. A deep rumble echoed across the comms as the alien entity spoke again, a voice like a storm breaking over the horizon. You resist. You evolve. But you are not ready. Korvax clenched his jaw. That phrase again. Not ready. Not ready for what? Then he saw it, a shift in the enemy's formation. They weren't just attacking at random anymore. The entity had studied human battle patterns, understood their tactics. It was now pushing them into position. Hurting them. Carter's eyes narrowed. He saw it too. They're not trying to wipe us out. He turned to Karthoks, a grim realization settling over his face. They're trying to contain us. And that's when it hit Karthoks. This wasn't an extermination. This wasn't even a war. It was a test. A horrifying clarity settled in his mind. The entity had no interest in destroying Earth. It had been watching, learning, studying how far humans could be pushed. Carter exhaled, a slow, measured breath. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it now, understanding. It's not here to win, he said. It's here to see if we break. For the first time, Karthoks understood why the Dominion had always feared humanity. Not because of their weapons. Not because of their numbers. But because they don't break. And the entity was about to find that out firsthand. Carter turned toward the defense grid's main terminal. If it's learning from us, then let's teach it something it wasn't expecting. He looked at Harper. We still have those orbital nukes? Harper's fingers flew across the controls. Yes, but they won't do much damage to something that's constantly adapting. They don't have to, Carter said. His expression was unreadable, but there was something else in his eyes now. A trap. Karthoks watched as Carter fed the launch codes into the system. If it wants to study us, let's give it something new to study. The countdown began. Across Earth's orbit, dozens of nuclear warheads armed simultaneously. And then, Carter deactivated their targeting systems. The room went silent. Harper's voice was stunned. You're launching blind? Carter didn't look away from the screens. No. I'm giving it a choice. And then, before anyone could stop him, he launched them. From the planet's surface, the missiles erupted into space, streaking toward the alien warship. Unpredictable. Uncontrolled. No pattern to decipher. The entity reacted instantly. The energy tendrils lashed out, intercepting the missiles, adjusting. Learning. But that was the trick. Because humans don't fight like machines. The missiles weren't the real weapon. They were the distraction. At that same moment, Earth's forces launched everything: ships, ground artillery, electronic warfare pulses. A chaotic, erratic, relentless assault. The alien ships faltered. Just for a second. But a second was all the humans needed. Karthoks watched in awe as the battle shifted in an instant. The entity had underestimated them. It had assumed it could calculate them, anticipate them. It had made the same mistake the Dominion once had. Humans weren't predictable. They were inevitable. The counterattack hit with full force. Coordinated, precise, but just messy enough to be unpredictable. The alien fleet, so perfect, so advanced, couldn't adjust fast enough. One by one, the ships fell. The massive warship, once untouchable, began to crack under the onslaught. And then, as quickly as it had come, the entity withdrew. The massive ship tore another rupture in space, pulling its remaining forces with it. As the last enemy vessel vanished, the voice returned, softer now. You are not ready, but you will be. Then, silence. The battlefield was empty. The invaders were gone. But Karthoks knew this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. Carter exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He turned to Karthoks. Tell your Dominion something for me. Karthoks raised an eyebrow. And what is that? Carter's lips curved into a grim smile. They're not the only ones out there anymore. And somewhere, beyond the stars, something else was watching. The silence after the battle felt unnatural. Earth's skies, once filled with fire and chaos, now stretched endlessly into the void. The alien fleet had vanished, leaving behind only wreckage and a lingering sense of unease. Karthoks stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the battlefield slowly settle. His warriors were silent, still processing what had just happened. The Dominion had always feared humanity's potential, but now he understood why. They weren't just survivors. They weren't just fighters. They were something else entirely. Carter exhaled, the tension finally releasing from his shoulders. "I don't like that it left on its own terms," he muttered, staring at the last remnants of the entity's energy dissipating in space. "Feels like we didn't win. Just bought ourselves some time." Harper adjusted the comms, relaying status updates from Earth's defenses. "Casualties are lower than expected, considering what we were up against," she said. "But people are scared, Carter. They don't know what just happened. And I don't blame them." Carter nodded slowly. "Yeah. Neither do I." Karthoks folded his arms, his expression unreadable. "You have no idea what you've just done, do you?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "We just survived. That's what we did." "No," Karthoks said, shaking his head. "You changed something. That entity, it wasn't here for conquest. It was measuring you, testing your limits. And now, it knows." Harper looked up from her console. "Knows what?" Karthoks's voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the weight of his words. "That humanity is ready." Carter let out a dry chuckle. "Ready for what?" Karthoks hesitated. The Dominion had spent centuries fearing the emergence of a species that could challenge them, not through brute strength, not through overwhelming numbers, but through sheer adaptability. And now, it was no longer just fear. It was reality. "The universe is vast," Karthoks finally said. "The Dominion once believed we were the only true Deathworlders, warriors shaped by harsh, unforgiving worlds. We thought we were the strongest." His gaze settled on Carter. "We were wrong." Carter met his stare but said nothing. He didn't need to. Because deep down, they both understood the truth. Earth had always fought wars among itself, always struggled, always adapted. But this was different. This was something bigger. And now, something out there had taken notice. The remaining human fleet began the slow process of regrouping, retrieving escape pods, searching for survivors among the wreckage. The aftershocks of battle still rippled across the planet, but the immediate threat was gone. Harper rubbed her temples, exhaustion setting in. "So what happens now?" Carter exhaled, hands on his hips. "Now? We rebuild. We learn from this. And we get ready for whatever comes next." Karthoks studied him for a long moment. "You're not afraid?" Carter tilted his head. "Oh, I'm terrified," he admitted. "But being scared doesn't change what we have to do." Harper let out a tired laugh. Typical human response. The comms crackled, interrupting the moment. A signal, weak, fragmented, but unmistakably from the other side of the galaxy. A message. Karthoks narrowed his eyes, listening as the static resolved into something clearer. A voice, alien, distant. Familiar. "You are not alone." The transmission ended. Silence. Harper turned to Carter. "Please tell me that was some kind of interference." Carter didn't answer. He just stared out at the wreckage, the vast emptiness beyond. The Dominion had always believed itself to be the peak of warfaring civilizations, the only true warriors in a cold, indifferent galaxy. They had feared humanity because of what they could become. But now, they all knew the truth. Humanity wasn't the only threat out there. And somewhere, in the depths of space, something else was watching. Waiting. And perhaps, just like the entity before them, it was ready to test them next.